When your neighbor rolls in new tanks and insists, "Don't worry, it's not about you," should you keep calm or quietly check your evacuation map? Imagine the scene. You are sipping coffee by your window as columns of armored vehicles rumble past, their insignias unfamiliar, their crews scanning the horizon with wary eyes. This is not just a distant scenario for the pine-shadowed forests of Estonia or the silent lakes of Finland. It is a reality steadily encroaching upon what used to be tranquil borders. Across this northern edge of Europe, official military drills are underway, but behind the waving flags and friendly handshakes, a far more urgent and complex reality is gathering speed, one that could reshape the lives and destinies of millions. On NATO's eastern edge, the architects of Western nuclear policy now hold the reins. These are no ordinary military leaders. In decades past, they guarded the launch codes, whispered commands in the White House, and shaped doctrines that balanced the world on a knife's edge. Think of men like Colonel Michael Ziegelhofer, who once carried President Trump's nuclear football and now commands the 3rd Armored Brigade Combat Team at Estonia's Tapa base. Such figures have shifted from the shadows of nuclear protocol to overseeing armored brigades stretching from Estonia to Lithuania, transforming what appears to be routine partnership into a force poised for rapid action on Russia's doorstep. Consider how Tapa, once merely a dot on the map, a sleepy military outpost in northern Estonia, has transformed. Today, it is the spearhead of NATO's tank wedge in the Baltics. The base now buzzes with activity day and night, convoys of tanks, lines of British and German soldiers, drone operators in windowless trailers, and command centers filled with screens and satellite feeds. In Finland, the transformation is just as stark. The town of Mikkeli, once famous for its saunas, ski trails, and peaceful lakes, now conceals NATO's northern command center. Located barely 300 kilometers from St. Petersburg, it is staffed by multinational units and commanded by generals who have shaped Western doctrine for decades. The command center pulses with activity, a nerve center that can direct eastward operations at a moment's notice, its corridors alive with the hum of intelligence briefings and the tense energy of war games. But pause and ask, is this really about defense? Or are we witnessing the assembly of a machine built for speed, unpredictability, and force? The kind of apparatus that no Cold War briefing ever quite described? The public talk is of cooperation and readiness, but the reality is tanks, new air defense grids, and drone squadrons able to launch in minutes. The doctrine has shifted from slow, deliberate deterrence to rapid, flexible response. Think of the difference between the Maginot Line, a static wall of World War II, and the modern NATO deployment. Mobile, adaptable, and always on alert. It is as if the lessons of the past, where static defenses failed catastrophically, have been internalized, and now the West is betting everything on speed and unpredictability. Ignore these moves, and you risk being blindsided, not only as a distant observer, but as someone whose daily safety, job security, and future are suddenly entangled in new fault lines. These alliances are quietly redrawing the boundaries between friends and foes, between peace and the prospect of abrupt conflict. Consider the example of Belgium in World War I, a nation that believed treaties and neutrality would protect it, only to find itself overrun when alliances shifted and the logic of war prevailed. Today, similar fault lines are emerging, only this time the speed of change is multiplied by technology and the scale of alliances. As these deployments accelerate, the difference between military exercise and real-world escalation grows dangerously thin. What happens next depends not just on leaders, but on how quickly ordinary people grasp the stakes. During the Cuban Missile Crisis, it was not just the leaders in Washington and Moscow who faced sleepless nights. Ordinary citizens dug backyard shelters, governments issued instructions for survival, and the world watched nervously for a sign that the next move would be the last. The lesson: when escalation is possible, everyone has a stake. Flags ripple in the wind, cameras snap, and soldiers form a wall of uniforms. But beneath the surface, the atmosphere is taut. The grinding of tank treads echoes along NATO's eastern edge, setting nerves on edge from the Baltic to the Black Sea. In Poland, local mayors have begun reviewing emergency plans last dusted off during the Cold War. In Lithuania, civil defense drills now include not only military personnel, but schoolchildren, shopkeepers, and city workers. The sense that something fundamental is shifting seeps into daily life. What appears to be routine defense is actually an armored crescent, meticulously assembled and pressed tight against Russia's border. This is not just another show of deterrence. It is directed by officers with nuclear clearances and war zone resumes. At Estonia's Tapa base, once a sleepy outpost, a colonel who once handled President Trump's nuclear football now runs the show. His days are no longer about protocol. Every sunrise means a new drill, and each briefing is a rehearsal for the real thing. The stakes are high, and the tempo is relentless. The reinforcements are relentless. Britain and Germany, once satisfied with symbolic commitments, are now all in. British generals with crisp uniforms and coalition savvy have become daily fixtures in Baltic Command. Their presence signals that NATO's support is anything but ceremonial. At the same time, Germany, long known for red tape and caution, has changed course. New brigades arrive, air defense batteries roll in, and logistics chains are streamlined for speed. The old obsession with perfect paperwork has been replaced by a new creed: readiness trumps bureaucracy. General Christian Freuding, who took command of Germany's land forces on the 1st of October, issued his first order: accelerate, expand, and if we make mistakes, so be it. Speed is paramount. This is a dramatic transformation for Germany, a country whose military bureaucracy was once legendary for its inflexibility. Now, new armored brigades are being formed in Lithuania, while air defense systems are deployed in record time. The 45th Panzer Brigade is not a symbolic gesture, but a real unit with real teeth. During the Cold War, it would have taken months, or even years, to move such forces. Today, it happens in weeks, sometimes days. The priority is no longer perfection, but presence. Finland, too, has crossed a historic threshold. Once fiercely neutral, now it hosts NATO's Northern Command Center, barely 300 kilometers from St. Petersburg. This is a seismic change for a country that joined NATO only recently. The headquarters is a nerve center capable of directing eastward operations in a heartbeat. Nordic officers drill for surprises, closing the gap between Helsinki and Brussels with every scenario they run. The symbolism is unmistakable. The former buffer state is now a frontline fortress. Publicly, all this buildup is framed as mutual defense. But on the ground, these bases and brigades are more than insurance. They are a launch system, primed for rapid pivot from exercise to deployment. The message is unmissable. Buffer zones are gone, and the chessboard has been reset for action, not just reassurance. Consider the fate of buffer states in history: the Sudetenland in the 1930s, or Afghanistan during the Great Game between Britain and Russia. In both cases, the disappearance of a buffer led to catastrophic conflict. Today, the disappearance of buffers signals a willingness to accept higher risks. The pace is dizzying. Regional peace and Europe's post-war balance are eroding far faster than most citizens realize. As alliances discard their old restraint and ramp up their buildup, the line between defense and preparation for something more aggressive grows thinner with each passing day. The echoes of the past, of arms races and brinksmanship, are unmistakable. Yet the technology, the speed, and the scale are all new. But this is only the opening move. As new security outposts appear further south and east, the arms race and its risks accelerate. In Romania, American air defense units have been quietly rotated in, while French troops drill near the Black Sea coast. In Slovakia, the government debates whether to allow permanent NATO bases, a topic that would have been taboo just a few years ago. Think the organization of Turkic states is about colorful costumes and ancient songs? Look again. The alliance is remaking itself almost overnight, exchanging folklore for joint drills, military bases, and intelligence packs. Once just a gathering for poetry and shared language, the organization now has members quietly approving intelligence hubs and coordinated defense plans. This is not just a festival. It is a blueprint for military cooperation, with real resources and real risks. Azerbaijan stands out as a nimble operator, playing Turkey and Britain against each other to expand its own power. In the recent Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, Azerbaijan leveraged Turkish drones and British diplomatic support to achieve rapid victories. Meanwhile, Turkey is the alliance's silent engine, sending weapons, technology, and steady guidance, steering the organization toward its own strategic goals. Joint exercises in Central Asia, involving thousands of troops and dozens of aircraft, are now routine rather than exceptional. Those who used to keep their distance, insisting on neutrality or caution, are running out of room to hide. The new military agenda, with regular exercises and signed agreements, is pulling everyone deeper into a single orbit, where sitting on the fence is no longer an option. Kazakhstan, once hesitant to antagonize Russia, now participates in joint drills with Turkey and Uzbekistan. Kyrgyzstan, pressured by both Moscow and Ankara, finds itself drawn into increasingly complex security arrangements. This coalition is not just growing stronger internally, it is also breaking free from old dependencies on Russia and China. The aim is clear: secure true strategic autonomy and gain a voice that can shape outcomes beyond its own region. In a world where supply chains are fragile and energy routes are contested, strategic autonomy is no longer a luxury. It is a necessity. The Organization of Turkic States is investing in its own satellite communications, cyber defense, and indigenous weapons production, determined not to be caught off guard. But danger lurks. If this alliance crosses the threshold from security partnership to a hardened military bloc, the rules governing trade, peace, and even war could be rewritten overnight. What once seemed like harmless brotherhood may soon redraw the entire map of regional security. The precedent is there. In the early 20th century, the Balkan League, a coalition formed for self-defense, ended up sparking the Balkan Wars, which in turn helped ignite World War I. And the Turkic states are not alone. Across the region, old alliances are being tested, as new power centers rise and the pace of military coordination accelerates. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization, originally a diplomatic forum, now conducts joint military exercises involving thousands of troops from China, Russia, and Central Asian republics. The African Union, too, is exploring joint rapid response forces to handle crises that once would have drawn in Western intervention. Why are young Cubans abandoning sunlit streets for Europe's war-scarred fields? And what does it signal when small nations step into the shadows of world conflict? Cuba, long isolated by decades of embargo, is now sending its sons to fight for Russia. The motivation is stark: salaries paid in Russian rubles, sums that would take a Cuban professional years to earn at home. For many, the chance to earn in a month what would take years in Havana is impossible to ignore. Reports suggest thousands of Cuban volunteers, alongside North Koreans, are joining Russian ranks at the front. For many, this is not about ideology or politics. It is a desperate gamble for survival, a glimmer of financial hope, and sometimes a one-way escape from poverty. In interviews, some Cuban volunteers describe being promised jobs in construction or logistics, only to find themselves pressed into military service. Others see it as the only way to send money back to families left behind. But this goes beyond a search for paychecks. A new, unofficial military international is taking shape. Russia, North Korea, Iran, Venezuela, and Cuba are quietly linking up, trading battlefield tactics, technology, and the kind of hard-earned experience that no black market can supply. Iranian drone experts have been spotted in Donbass, while North Korean artillery units reportedly train alongside Russian forces. The lines between mercenary work and state policy are blurring. Ukraine's battered planes have become a laboratory for modern warfare. Drones, electronic jamming, and new strategies are tested under relentless Western scrutiny. Each lesson learned here may soon surface in another conflict, on another continent. The use of cheap, mass-produced drones has already inspired imitators in conflicts from Yemen to Libya. Electronic warfare techniques honed in Ukraine are being exported to clients in Africa and the Middle East. For Moscow, these foreign fighters are more than extra boots. They are a way to swell ranks without provoking outrage at home. For Havana, it is a rare chance to earn hard currency and regain lost relevance, not just through fiery speeches, but through blood and sacrifice. For Pyongyang, it is a testbed for new weapons and a way to earn much-needed resources from a grateful Kremlin. Yet this new globalization of conflict carries unpredictable consequences. The skills, connections, and hardened resolve forged today could one day spark fresh crises in places no one expects. Consider the example of the Spanish Civil War. International brigades gained combat experience that later fueled resistance movements and revolutions across Europe. The fighters of today may become the insurgents, or the mercenaries, of tomorrow. This is the new world order. Local struggles are now pieces in a global chess match between shifting power blocks. And always, it is ordinary people who suffer most when distant rivalries become nightmares at home. In Syria, local communities found themselves caught between the ambitions of Iran, Russia, Turkey, and the United States. In Yemen, foreign drones and mercenaries prolong the suffering of civilians long after the original grievances have been forgotten. As these alliances tighten and the rules of engagement shift, the boundaries between friend and foe grow murkier. The next act reveals how the world's new security blocks are redrawing the map, and what that means for the future of neutrality. When alliances mutate and war games bleed into reality, will you be ready or scrambling for an escape? In today's world, neutrality is no longer a reliable shield. Once proudly independent countries now find themselves tethered to tight webs of defense pacts and shadowy strategic deals. For ordinary people, the definition of security is shifting underfoot. Switzerland, once the epitome of neutrality, now debates joining European Union defense initiatives. Austria, long proud of its non-alignment, quietly upgrades its air defenses and consults with NATO planners. Old comforts, cultural kinship or diplomatic tradition, are fading, swept aside by cold, tactical logic. Nations are choosing partners for their battlefield leverage, not shared values. The result? Yesterday's friends may become tomorrow's adversaries, while so-called neutral territories morph into new fault lines. Think of Finland and Sweden. For decades, their neutrality was a point of pride and a buffer against superpower rivalry. Now, they have joined NATO, accepting that neutrality alone cannot guarantee security. Economic pressures only intensify these changes. As budgets shrink, even loyal allies may turn opportunistic, auctioning their allegiance or allowing their lands to become pawns in the games of larger powers. Stability and trust fall away, replaced by hard pragmatism and sometimes open ruthlessness. In the Sahel region of Africa, governments once dependent on French security aid now turn to Russian mercenaries for protection, sometimes at the cost of human rights and long-term stability. Across continents, rapid militarization is transforming entire regions at breakneck speed. New bases rise, unfamiliar alliances crystallize, and advanced arsenals materialize in the dead of night. In the Pacific, Australia, the United Kingdom, and the United States have forged the AUKUS Pact, pledging to develop nuclear submarines and share advanced technology. In the Middle East, Israel and Gulf states coordinate missile defense against Iran's growing arsenal. By the time most people notice, the rules and the dangers have already shifted. What can you do, whether as a citizen or a nation, to keep up? Start with vigilance. Map out new alliances forming around you. Interrogate who controls the flow of information and see through the narratives that justify every drill in the name of readiness or defense. Demand transparency from those in power. Push for real answers about military budgets and emergency plans. Do not settle for slogans. Seek substance. For example, in Sweden, citizens are encouraged to keep emergency supplies and know evacuation routes. In South Korea, regular civil defense drills prepare the public for sudden escalation. To ignore these shifts, or to misunderstand them, is to risk far more than national security. Your livelihood, your personal freedoms, even your sense of normalcy, are in play. The world is changing at a pace that punishes those who stand still. Recall how in Yugoslavia in the 1990s, communities that failed to understand the shifting alliances and growing tensions were caught unprepared when conflict erupted. Today's world moves even faster. The global chessboard is being reset, one move at a time. Those clinging to old assumptions may find themselves swept aside. The question is no longer if you will be affected, but whether you will shape your future or be shaped by it. In South America, countries like Colombia and Brazil now debate how to respond to growing Chinese and American rivalry. In the Arctic, indigenous communities organize to assert their rights as great powers maneuver for control of resources and shipping lanes. As new alliances harden and regional tensions rise, the margin for error shrinks. The next move could determine far more than borders. It could decide who thrives and who is left behind. History is littered with examples where a single miscalculation changed destinies. The assassination in Sarajevo that sparked World War I, the misread signals before the Korean War, the failed diplomacy that preceded the Rwandan genocide. The old maps are dissolving. Will you catch the shape of the new world before the next decisive move? Behind the language of drills and shared interests, alliances are furiously rewriting boundaries, on paper, in policy, and on the ground. The tempo will not slow for anyone. The 21st century's new normal is relentless change. What once felt remote, columns of armor rolling through sleepy villages, foreign generals walking old parade grounds, command centers humming where only silence reigned, is now the daily reality across the Baltics, through Central Europe, and even in lands that once clung to proud neutrality. The rules that defined yesterday are vanishing. Neutrality is being bartered for promises of defense. Cultural kinship is replaced by hard calculations and battle maps. Partnerships are morphing into a clash of postures, tanks and drones, now the grammar of diplomacy. You may want to turn away, to believe that peace is the natural order, that these signals are only noise, politics as usual. But the price of indifference is not just irrelevance, it is exposure, or even being swept aside as others redraw the game. Your economic future, your safety, the very texture of your community are being rewritten in meetings you do not see, by forces you barely sense. In the Baltics, real estate values fluctuate with every new deployment. In Poland, the job market adapts to the influx of foreign troops and contractors. Each exercise, each new station, each handshake and fatigues is a move on a chessboard where the stakes are higher than most dare to imagine. The headlines may whisper about cooperation, but beneath the surface, it is a race for readiness, a contest where speed, flexibility, and alertness determine not just battles, but destinies. In this environment, to lag behind is to invite danger. Ask yourself, are you willing to look past the soothing words? Are you tracking how today's assurances are mutating into tomorrow's vulnerabilities? The world is not pausing for anyone to catch their breath. If you are a policymaker, update your risk assessments monthly, not yearly. If you are a citizen, stay informed, connect with your community, and have a plan for emergencies. History rewards those who adapt and punishes those who do not. Stay awake, stay alert. Because in this era of shifting alliances, the penalty for drifting off is to awaken in a reality you never chose, a world where your options have already been decided in your absence. The new world is being drawn. Will you help draw it, or simply live within its lines?